All right. So for our warm up for today, what we're going to go over are some complex operation or complex number operations of adding, subtracting, and then some of these we have where we have to multiply those I powers or those I imaginary numbers. So we're going to take a look at those for our warm up for today. So let's go ahead and start on the first one. So the first one I have is I have 8 plus 2i plus quantity of 4 minus 6i minus 2 minus I. So basically what I'm going to do is like what we did in our class, what we did in our lesson before, is go ahead and organize your real numbers and your imaginary numbers. So I'm going to set up my category of reals and imaginary. Okay, so but before we get started with that, I got to take a look and see, do I have any of those negative signs I had to distribute over? Like if I take a look, I see a plus, so that's not going to change anything. But I do have this negative here, so I definitely want to distribute it to everything afterwards. So what's going to happen is this. This is positive. What this is going to do, negative times positive will make this now negative. Negative times this negative will now make this positive. And then once I change those two, I can change this now back to a positive, so that way it's a little bit easier to kind of manipulate and add or subtract. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to find all my real numbers. So 8, 4, negative 2, 8, 4, negative 2. And then I'm going to find all my imaginary. I have my 2i, negative 6i, and then I have a positive i. Okay, so now what I'm going to take a look at is I'm just doing 8 plus 4. Well, that's 12 minus 2. Now I have 10. Now look at my i's. I have 2i minus 6i. That will give me a negative 4i plus another I. So I'm going to subtract these. So what's going to happen is I'm now going to have a negative 3i. Okay, so that's pretty much what our answer is for our first one. Go ahead and pause the video from here, check and double check, take a look at the work, and then go from there. All right, so for number 2, so number 2, what we're focusing on is basically that distributive property with the I and applying those power of I rules. So the first one we want to take a look at. First part is 8 plus 2i multiplied by I here. 2i and 4 minus 6i. So here we go. So I'm going to distribute again. I'm going to take this I and I'm going to distribute it in here. I'm going to have now 8i. I'm going to have 2i squared. Okay, so I'm going to grab another marker real quick. I'm going to distribute this part here and here. So now I'm going to have 8i. And then I'm going to have a 2 times negative 6, so that's negative 12i squared. So remember in class what we talked about is anything with an I squared is going to turn into what? So in other words, this part here is going to be negative 1. This part here is also going to turn to negative 1. So I have to do a multiplication part here. So 2 times negative 1 and negative 12 times negative 1. So let's see what that factors out to. So I'm going to have 8i still here. 2 times negative 1, well, that's now negative 2. I still have 8i here. Negative 12 times negative 1 will now have a positive 12. And then just like our last example, let's talk about the reals and our imaginary. Okay, so from here, so our real number, negative 2, positive 12. My imaginaries, I have 8i and a positive 8i. So this is going to make it a little bit easier. So negative 2 plus 12, they're going to subtract. I'm going to get 10. 8i plus another 8i, we'll now have 16i. And the i's don't change because we're adding, so we're just going to combine our coefficients and numbers up front. Okay. All right, so pause the video, try to work out number 3, and then we'll cover that as well. number 3, your more complicated one, something that you'll definitely see on a test or something like that. So what we're going to look at is basically applying both of these concepts, multiplying, distributing, changing your I power, things like that. So let's go ahead and get started here. First thing I'm going to take care of is I'm going to distribute. I'm going to distribute this I here, and then at the same time, I also want to make sure I have this negative 2I here, and I distribute it to everything inside this parentheses. So what I'm going to have here is that 10 is going to stay by itself. So then 10 plus I times 2, so now it's a 2I. I times a 3I, that is 3I squared. And that takes care of that side. Over here, I'm going to have a negative 2I and a 4, so now that's a negative 8I. Negative 2I and a negative 3I, well, now it's going to be a positive 6. And since they both have I squared. Okay, so pause right here. I have to take a look at the I power. So in other words, do I have any I squared? So if you take a look, I have 1 here. And I also have 1 here. And I take a look and there's nothing else. So that's going to turn to -1. That's going to basically simplify to -1. And then we're going to go ahead and combine and simplify these parts here. So I'm now going to have 10, 2I. This is now going to be a positive times a negative is now a -3. That stays the same. Positive times a negative, well now that's still a negative, or that's now a negative here. And now I go back to my reals. Real numbers, I have 10, -3, -6. Imaginaries, I just have my 2I, and then minus 8I. Now always use that sign that's in front of that term. Okay, so here we go. We got 10 minus 3, well that'd be 7. So 10 minus 3, that's 7. What's 7 minus 6? 1. Imaginary, we'll have a positive 2I and a negative 8I. They're going to subtract each other. So I'm going to have more negative, so a -6. Okay. Make sure you guys fill in those answers.